For those of you folks that are watching us, which I would highly suggest if you haven't gone to watch, you're going to need to watch because I've got let me figure the right word to say here. Special, wonderful, incredible, entrepreneurial, just overall badass in life. With me today, Lisa Song Sutton. What's happening, lady?
Hey, nice to see you. Thank you so much for having me. I know it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, we were joking before this just for like a half a second. For those of you, half a second's really quick. But Lisa and I ended up living in the same building, and I ran into her one day and I was like, Lisa, you want a podcast? She's probably like, dude, who the heck are you? like a little weirded out. But I knew you had a good heart, and I knew you would be receiving of that. And so I think we tried back in the day, and then it didn't work. And then I recently reached back around to you, and you're like, yeah, let's do it.
I'm like, let's finally get it scheduled. So here we are.
Yes,
I'm so glad we're making it happen.
And by the way, Cupcake's in the house too.
That's right. Cupcake, my corgi, she's here chilling. Yeah. She's part of the team.
I love it. So obviously, as we talked about, you've done a lot, and it's amazing to see someone like you, I'm sure, in the journey, learn so many different things. And I just told you a minute ago that the conversations I enjoy having really kind of reveal what goes on underneath the hood. And I was in my homework, in my research, I was looking around, and I heard something that you said around your father passing away.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand this because my mom passed away when I was a young boy, right? And I know that there are subsequent traumas that go along with that. Now, I'm not saying you have trauma, but this is where we're going to go with it. As a result of my mom passing away, I learned over life that I had a lot of things to resolve. And I'm curious because in your case, there's so many different directions or elements or effects that losing a parent can have on you, depending on what stage of life you're at and sort of how it's unfolded in that case. For you, how has that impacted you in becoming successful, in becoming a partner and dating and in those different types of environment, the conversations you have with your mother? Talk to me some about that. Let me know what that kind of, what it may have done to you or with you or for you and all the surrounding pieces of that.
Sure. So I was very, very close to my father, and he passed away kind of unexpectedly in 2020. It was just very fast. So he got diagnosed with cancer August of 2020 and passed October of 2020. So it was
I have the chills. Wow,
it was
chills. Yeah.
Fast.
Wow.
Yeah. And so cancer doesn't run in the family, but my father came from an era, he was born in 1941. So he came from an era where you start smoking cigarettes at like 15. He joined the United States Air Force as an enlisted at, age of 18. And so I think just from that era and that generation and being in the military, cigarettes were just his thing. I think he stopped smoking when he was in his 50s. And so he had lung cancer that had spread very quickly to his brain and lymph nodes.
Wow.
And so, it was unexpected. It was fast. And for me, it was a bit of a fog, a bit of a blur. I was obviously here in Las Vegas running my businesses. And I quickly had to switch to a schedule of 4 days down in Arizona and 3 days here in Vegas to obviously be with my dad. And so it was crazy. It was a really crazy time. And he passed, and there were so many, things that came out for me during that time. But I think one of the main things was that just the true realization that life is short. It's this cliche that we hear all the time, and it's on memes and it's on social media, right? Life is short, life is short. And it's just so true. And so it taught me to really just try to be cognizant of who you're around and what you're doing, and make sure that you're living for the things that you want to be doing.
Sure. Were there emotional guardrails that you believe that you had in place to withstand that devastation, right? Because, when you think sudden, unexpectedly, it's almost like the worst case scenario, right? It's like because you weren't expecting it and you had hoped for a longer term, of course, of time to spend and invest and enjoy, certainly with your family, your father in this case. Would you say that you were able to handle it either properly or within a framework that allowed you to understand this as a process of life, or were you more devastated at the result of what had happened, and did you just have to go into one of those recovery modes mentally, emotionally, spiritually? And I'm asking that because I really want to draw out the texture of what helped you move forward and stay on top of your businesses and progress and keep a level head on your shoulders during the moments that you move forward in.
Well, I've learned through my adult life that when I experience emotional trauma or emotional stress, my coping mechanism is to throw myself into work, right? So it's probably an avoidance tactic.
Yeah.
But I've seen through my adult life in my dating relationships, right, that if there's emotional stress or emotional drama, my default is to throw myself into somewhere I can control, somewhere I feel productive, right? And so I throw myself into work. And so after he passed, I had a messy couple of days. And then I was just back. I was so excited to just get back into work so it could take my mind off of the grief. But I think when you lose someone who's so close to you and so intertwined with your identity, the grief is rolling, right? So it's not that it's, oh, you need a week or a month or a year to, get over it. It's a rolling grief. Or for me, I would forget that my dad had passed.
Wow.
And so something cool would happen or something funny would happen and I would go to text him.
And you thought, wow, he's
and
not
then
here.
I'd remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So just little things like that, it's a rolling grief. So your first Christmas, your first birthday, his first birthday after he's passed, right? The first Father's Day after he's passed. Those are times where it hits you really hard and it feels just like the day.
I love the positioning of the rolling grief. That is a fantastic way to say that. And it's like the effects of it just keep compounding over time until you meet that new scenario where there's that existence from before where you had that interaction with, in this case, your father, and then you realize it's gone. And you're like, oh, wow, there's a hole there. And you got to fill the void. That's incredible how you say that. Powerful at that, folks. Listen in on that one. The identity piece that you said, is there, in your case with your father, was it he was the dad that was there with you all the time, loving on you, playing with you when you were growing up, and do you remember those days? And, I think also about, I'm always very inquisitive and curious around how one woman can go off in a different direction and be less driven like you and focused on building a massive business, multiple businesses at that, versus going over here and saying, you know what, I just want to be a stay-at-home mom and this is okay with me. And so I'm curious on how, any of that upbringing and interaction between you and your father, maybe even bringing your mother into it, influenced you to go down this track of becoming badass, right? I mean, of course, somebody that's doing epic stuff. And I think that's fascinating how, whether it's a twist here or a turn there, different divergent paths can end up shaping you to become somebody. And so in your case, what do you recognize as some of that influenced you in that process, in terms of how he and you interacted?
Yeah. So my dad for me was always a safe harbor. My mom is stereotypical Asian tiger mom. From the age of 5, I was piano lessons, flute lessons, tap dance lessons, straight A's, extremely focused on academics. And it was no question, I will become an overachiever. And I'm so grateful for just the sheer amount of effort that takes, the amount of care and the amount of love that takes to really do that with your child. And so because my mom and I were on this tear of we have to do all the things all the time, My dad, for me, was, like I said, the kind of safe harbor of after a long, long day, we would just get a chance to hang out and read together. Or, if my mom, I think like middle school was around the time my mom and I started like, butting heads a little bit. My dad was my safe harbor, right? And he would be the one to be like, kind of talking me down right after if I've had an argument with my mom. He'd be like, it's going to be okay. He'd talk out both sides and, he'd try to calm us both down, right? So he was always like keeping the peace. My dad would keep the peace. So I think I'm a healthy blend of both of them, in that my drive for sure comes from my mom's persistence and my mom's level of expectation and me not wanting to disappoint. And my dad has, like I said, he was always that safe harbor, the safe space, and as a result, shaped what I would come to look for in a partner, right?
Yeah.
Kind of steady, consistent, reliable. Like that was what I was always drawn to, even from like high school onward, because that was the example that I had at home.
Sure. Yeah, there's a few things you say in there that are important that I want to really put some spotlight on, which is one was the disappointment of probably meeting the expectations of your mother. Is there a pressure in that you feel that even in today's society and expectations put on us in terms of building a successful business, being a great partner, where, and again, I always take the position of like, there's no right or wrong answer. It's always just how you see the world, because your thoughts matter. And certainly the suggestions that come along with that matter. And so when I think about disappointment, it's like, well, how do you educate someone, man or woman, on that part of life where you could still do things, make progress without this, I would say, this gripping of disappointing somebody? Because I think that's almost a tough situation. In your case, it sounds like you used it for fuel. In other cases, it could actually cripple them and not let them get to where they want to be. So what would you have to say around that particular emotion in essence?
I just think it's a mindset thing, because if I looked at it in a negative connotation of like, well, why are you putting all this pressure on me? I had started to view it from a very early age as like, she overlays these expectations because I'm capable, right? If you tell your kid, I expect straight A's, the underlying assumption is that they're 100% capable of doing it. And that's why you're mad when they don't rise to their level of capability.
Sure.
Right? As opposed to they're literally incapable.
Right.
And what you're just going to keep overlaying this unrealistic expectation. Like, I think, whether it's kids who come from immigrant families or, kind of first generation to go to college or whatever the impetus is, I think high expectations set upon people, whether it's from parents or siblings or just someone who cares about them, I assume that at the base level, it's because it's out of care. It's because it's out of like a true expectation that that person is capable of whatever high standard you're trying to hold them to. And so any disappointment or angst that draws from it is because you're looking at that person going, you're so capable.
Sure.
Like, why aren't you, why don't you want to rise to what you're capable of?
Yeah. The guy that runs this place, I was just talking to him about that 10 minutes before you walked in the door. He's probably laughing in the other room right now. Said the same thing. It's like, what if we could self-actualize and become everything that we were meant to become, right? But then this is a whole nother Pandora's box of things we can open up around what that really looks like. As far as the expectations now and the standards you set for yourself, do you deliberately set those expectations and standards now based on some of that experience that you had from a younger age, and now more in your current day reasoning and your ability to say, you know what, I'm going to maintain those, and then also I'm going to meet these? I think a lot of people indirectly have standards, but they don't purposely set them, and they're living the standards of somebody else, and they're not living the standards that are going to get them to some place that they want to be and into who they can become. So what would you say as far as standards are concerned in terms of, how to help yourself meet standards that are going to serve you and help you launch forward and become the person that you want to become, despite all of the past evidence that you may not be where you want to be or whatever that narrative is? How would you talk around some of that standard stuff?
I think when you're growing up, I'm a firm believer that like kids need guidance. It's just what it is. Like you're a child. You're not, you're not an adult, right?
Yeah.
And so you do need guidance. And so I think it's very helpful to have those standards and guardrails put up where you're like, oh, okay, like that's what I'm going to be striving for. As an adult, I think some of that expectation is healthy in the sense that like it keeps you guided towards whatever North Star that might be on like your achievement scale. But as an adult, I think, and it's hard, and I'm in the process, right? We're always in the process, but like doing that work of the personal work, right? The personal development work around like, what is important to me?
Yeah.
Why am I doing what I'm doing? It is what I'm doing right now still as important to me, right? Because I think our priorities change in the different seasons of our lives. And so I just think that if you're willing to be attuned to doing the personal work and kind of checking in with yourself every now and again, and seeing how you feel and why you feel that way and what you're working on, and does that help kind of serve whatever goals or purpose that you lay out for yourself.
Sure. Yeah.
It takes a lot of work to do the self-check-in.
It's a lot of work. Now, in your case, do you balance the personal development work with the business work, or is that a more lopsided fraction? And in addition to that, I always love. I tell people like I'm going to come at you in a healthy way, because I think that there's a need for more human connection in today's day and age. And it's like, I can see the outcomes and what they look like on social media, but it's like, what's really happening underneath the hood? In your case, is there an area in your life now? Don't forget the fraction question. I didn't let that fraction question go as well, where you're looking at and you're saying, if I could take more personal responsibility in this domain, and I'll give you the perfect example. I've mentioned this in a lot of my recent podcasts. Like I'm very thankful to have a beautiful lady. We have a baby, but I'm becoming so much more in the relationship category, where historically, from my mom's loss of life and all these other things, I've been pretty messed up. And so I'm actively working on this, and I have no problem vocalizing it. In your case, what is that for you? Is there an area where you've realized, like, you know what, I suffer in this space. Like, I have no problem admitting it. I'm taking control of it. I'm working on it, whether that's in the business side, maybe it's more on the personal side. What would you have to say to that question?
I've definitely come to realize in my adult life that, as I'd mentioned before, like anytime I would experience emotional stress, my default was just to pour myself into work. So somewhere it's good in the sense that you end up with this very productive output, but it's, not as good because you're not dealing with the problem, right? It's an avoidance tactic.
Sure.
And so I've learned that about myself. And there was a long period of time where I didn't do a lot of, or I didn't prioritize the personal development side. I viewed personal development as getting better at business, right? That's how I viewed personal development, right? And I joined YPO about 2 years ago, the Young Presidents Organization. And in that, you have the chapter, but then you break out into these groups called Forum, and it's between like 6 to 8 people. And essentially becomes kind of like your personal board of advisors. And so I've been in my Forum about 1.5 years now. And a lot of it's based around like doing the work, right? The personal development work. And that was a surprising element to me because it is a business organization.
Sure.
And I was just like, but what does this have to do with my business, right?
Yeah.
And everyone in my forum are all like wildly successful. And I'm like, well, if they're doing this work and it's important to them, clearly there's something here, right? Who am I to like poo-poo it? And obviously quickly realized it has to be in sync, right? It's not always perfect. It's not always like equal or anything like that. But like, if you don't take the time to do that personal development work around like, well, what are your triggers or why do you respond to things in that fashion? And you can see now as an adult, right, there's been a pattern of that repeated behavior or whatever it is. If you don't do the work to figure out the why, then there will come a time where you plateau.
Sure. Understandable. Yeah, that's great. I mean, we got personal board of, personal advisors is a fantastic thing to have. I was on a phone call with a mentor of mine last night, an hour and a half having a relationship conversation. This guy coaches celebrities and just really incredible people behind the scenes, big names. And, he was just sharing with me the way to be better. And I'm thinking, what and he was saying the same thing. He's like, I didn't have someone like me in your ear right now when I was younger. I messed up. I'm teaching you. Same thing. These folks are teaching us, was I'm sure you're well aware of. I keep hearing this, like going back to work thing. Outside of the standards and the expectations, I think that you had started to breed in your earlier days to, meet your mom's personality. Today, is there other things included in that drive you so much that make you want to just keep working and go to work? Is there, and I get the in service of people and helping people out and all those great things, but if you were to really pull back the layers and say, what is that part of you that just keeps you bullheaded towards the business and the work and the business and the work? What is that?
There's just a deep personal interest. I think I've always been a builder at heart, and I've always just been intrigued with like the building process of like, fleshing out a company, taking an idea, like turning something from nothing, right? And for now, at this moment, like I'm really, really enjoying two things in particular. So we have the real estate brokerage, it's just a lot of fun. And the agents we have in particular, we've been on this mission to turn all of our agents into real estate investors. And that's just like a deep personal mission of financial independence and financial security and the idea that like it's not handed to you, but if you work it, you can reap the rewards.
Sure.
And so I love doing that with our agents and kind of seeing that mental switch where you have these really incredible, actually most of our team's women, these really incredible, strong women who've been in the business and they're smart and capable at what they do and they make good money helping other people buy and sell real estate. And yet they own their own home, which is great.
Right.
But like you spent all this time finding all your investors these deals, right? Like how are you not buying this real estate yourself? And they're like, oh, And you're just like, I know how much you make because we're paying out the commission. You know what I mean? I'm like, I know how much you make. Like you are more than capable of taking 20% as a down payment, right? And buying an investment property. And they're like, oh my God. You know what I mean? Like, they're like almost embarrassed because they're like, holy cow, yes. Like, how was I not doing this earlier? So I love that. And then with the Veteran Fund, the Venture Capital Fund, we just made our 7th investment into our 7th company. And we're focused on investing in companies that are in the technology space that are run by a veteran or military spouse focused on national security. I can't tell you how like deeply personal that is to me. I think it's very important. And I absolutely love the work that we're doing with the fund. It's not a charity. You say the Veteran Fund, and for some reason people think nonprofit. It's for profit. It's a venture capital fund. We make these investments and we take a piece of their company, right, for equity.
That's fantastic.
But my God, like you can't, if you could design the perfect entrepreneur to invest in, I would argue that it's a military veteran because they're already battle tested, right?
That's so true.
They have the can't quit in them, right? That intangible that you want of any entrepreneur who's coming to you going, I know I can do this. I just need help getting there, right?
Sure.
And then again, with that tight focus of technology, and national security, like, okay, what does that mean? It means it's, 3D printed satellites. It means it's 3D printed drones that drop bombs. I mean, we're so tightly focused on items that can have a commercial application, but most importantly, they're going to be utilized by the government, and it's going to be in furtherance of making our country better.
Sure. Is that deeply close to you because of the fact that your father was part of the military?
For sure, yeah. So I'm not a veteran myself,
Right,
but obviously coming from a military family, my father was a Vietnam War veteran, and so he did 20 years with the United States Air Force, and then he was 20 years DoD, Department of Defense.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
I grew up down in a small town in southeastern Arizona called Sierra Vista that's next to an Army intelligence base called Fort Huachuca. That's where my father worked the entire time I grew up.
I went to a high school called Sierra Vista here in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So many different directions I can go based on what you just said, and I'm gonna go. It's the fun part about having these conversations. It's like it comes through you, and then it filters and it flows out across the way. The entrepreneurship thing has always been intriguing. You also brought up earlier Miss Nevada, which I think is probably a fun place to go to, because there's a genesis, I think, in your journey. But I also think that, from a self-worth and an identity, so many fun things I want to explore with you. But let's go back to Miss Nevada and your time there and winning, which set you up for fantastic opportunities here locally in the state, nationally. What do you think is some of the crisis that we, as a human race, women and men included, but in your case, you're probably more on the women's side because it's obviously you, with, trying to be somebody that they're not, or, somebody getting on a stage and, you have a real world experience in your case where it's important to be beautiful on the inside versus just try to be it on the outside, and trying to match these different elements in life. And in the case of women, pageants, all that stuff, what would you be able to talk to about that in terms of, a woman being able to find their true self and, not just focus on external, but internal? And what would be some steps that you might be able to suggest to help a woman feel more beautiful internally, so that what they say and do on stage isn't the only thing that matters? It's much deeper than that.
So what I love about pageantry is that it truly is one of the best ways to ingratiate yourself into the community, and you end up actually doing a lot of personal development work through your time. So when I was Miss Las Vegas and then winning Miss Nevada and becoming Miss Nevada, I did nearly 500 community appearances, volunteering in schools, reading in hospitals, working with nonprofits. I did a Boys and Girls Club tour of the whole state. I was out doing all these community appearances and nonprofit work. And it taught me so much, not only about myself, but it also had those perks, right? Of now 9 years later, I still have business relationships and friendships and personal connections from that time period of my life of literally going out and volunteering, right? I wasn't paid by all these nonprofit organizations to do these things. It was volunteering my time and truly being a brand ambassador almost, not just for the organization, but also for the whole state.
Sure.
And I think that's one of the best things, like I said, that I love about pageantry. And I think it pushes you as a contestant and as a title holder to be well-rounded, right? So it's not just, oh, you look great in a swimsuit. Yeah. It's not about that.
Right.
That's one part of your score, right? If you look at the areas of competition, interview, swimsuit, evening gown, on stage question, 50% of your score is talking between interview and on stage question, because when they know that when you're out in the community, you're not showing up to some elementary school with your swimsuit on, right? You're there to talk to third graders about why reading is important or whatever, you're there to talk.
Not going to Wet Republic to do top 50.
Yeah, there's, of course, you do get this chance for the red carpet moments, right? And you get to do the fancy appearances. But the heart of the work and the bulk of the work that you're doing, like I said, you're going to children's hospitals, right? And you're talking to families and kids and bringing hope You come in with that sash and crown on, and little kids are just like
Yeah,
so
yeah,
excited, and they're hanging on to every word.
Very
And
true.
so that's your opportunity to use the crown as a microphone
Mm,
and really amplify a message
sure.
of like empowerment and inspiration.
Mm,
And that's really, I think, the heart of any pageant winner, any pageant contestant. It's that community work.
yeah, well said. What about the internal compasses for the younger women, the women that maybe are lost right now, where they aspire to become something, someone, and I would say self-satisfy their feelings of worth and leave a distant former self behind. How does one like Lisa tell that person, like Lisa's having a coaching session with someone that's like, I don't feel like my life is amounting to anything, I don't feel like I've done anything worthwhile. I'm stuck, I'm unhappy. I don't feel like anybody values me. What would be your coaching moment with them? What would be some of the things that you tell them based on what your life is provided as far as experience is concerned?
I would encourage them to really try to kind of lose themselves in service,
Mm,
right?
mm,
It's hard to because we all have those moments, right? I think it's a total fallacy to think that anyone who's successful or anyone who's achieved something just always feels that great all the time,
yeah.
right? It's totally not true.
Yeah.
We all have our moments where we question what we're doing, why we're doing it. All of us have times where we feel lost.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, when I've had those lost moments, the best thing I can do is to that saying of like lose yourself in service.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's getting out and volunteering, whether it's taking up a cause with a nonprofit that's near and dear to you, something as simple as going to the animal shelter and walking dogs, like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that's a form of
Yeah.
volunteering. Like something that's just totally outside of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you can get, and there is true instant gratification in volunteering. I think you get this immediate like return
Yeah.
of like feeling good about what you're doing,
Yeah.
right? And I think that sometimes can help clear up the messiness that you might feel if you're feeling lost.
That's a good starting point. It's funny you bring that up. Yesterday, day of like one of these days, I went for a drive. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to drive a little bit. And then I think back to what you just said about service. When I first got sober, the first thing I did was go down to a church on Lake Mead and Nellis-ish on the northeast side of town and package food boxes for all of the underserved community over there. And I'm talking, basically people that were homeless.
Sure.
And I remember watching how they would arrive and they would come by themselves. Then some would have their two kids. And I'm thinking, and then some would have only their hands to carry I'm talking boxes that are like 50 pounds of food. They would carry them on their shoulders while their kids were next to them. And it completely transformed my perspective. And then there was one lady that showed up, and I think she had a cart, and she was rolling her food off, and her cart broke, and the food fell out. And I went over and I started helping her pick it up. And I said, let me just take you home, right? Let me just take you. And I put her in the car. I put all her stuff in the car, and we drove around the block, which wasn't too far. And she, the whole time, all she could say was how grateful and thankful and blessed she was, and that this was the best thing that could have happened to her. And she's so appreciative. And I'm sitting here measuring like where she's going, and I drop her off at this little pod of a house. And I said, I think I've got all this shit backwards. Like I've been like greedy and grumpy and like pissed off because I've got first world problems.
Complaining about our lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I got to figure this out differently, and it just brought me to this point where, like you're saying, it's like it helped me reorient how I saw the world, because it made me realize that not only in the action of doing this was there tremendous joy, but also that life isn't so bad. It's not as bad as we make it out to be.
Yeah, it never is. It never is.
Right.
We feel like that.
Yeah. And so that's how the mind works, right? It's like the mind will go in these just different directions and make you have these, I would say false examples of what the story is being that's written, right? Anywho, that's my tangent. I won't take up too much. I don't like to take up too much time. I'm usually the guy that doesn't say very much because it's all about you, right? That's the point. So going back to entrepreneurship, it's a big deal nowadays, right? It's like I think everybody's panicking in terms of like what's really going on like right now in this moment. And they want to start to jump into business. And you're fantastic at that. You're fantastic at, from what I've learned about you, jumping into something, making it work, aligning yourself with the right people, and getting something very substantial going in multiple different industries. So what does an entrepreneur today need to know about what it's going to take or require of them to get something underneath them firmly enough, strongly enough to build up off of that? Because we know it doesn't happen overnight. There's a lot of ass whoopings that you take. There's a lot of beatings that you take.
There's a lot of L's, for sure,
right? So how would you encourage that person, and what would you share as a message with them to make sure that they get off on the right footing and can do something with it?
Well, I'll preface my response with, I don't think entrepreneurship's for everybody. It's a hard road, and that saying of you're going to quit your 9 to 5 to do something that you're going to work 24/7. There's definitely truth to that, especially in the building phase, especially in the beginning. I think social media shows you the fruits of it, right? With the vacations and the cars and the, it's a Tuesday afternoon and I'm gallivanting around because I don't have a 9 to 5, right? Like that's what social media shows you. And there's elements of truth to that. That's true, that is a part of it. But what does it take to get there? I think it's a hard road. It's not for everyone. And frankly, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, I'm so grateful to have amazing staff and amazing employees. So there's, I think certain personality types and your own level of risk aversion and tolerance. If you have a very, very low risk aversion, I think entrepreneurship is just that much harder because you have to have a high tolerance for risk, right? There's ways to mitigate it, but there has to be some sort of element where you're like, I'm jumping in and I don't care if it gets crazy because I'm just so excited about it. Because that level of enthusiasm, that motivation, it does not last. It's not like it's up here and then it just stays the course while you're building. It immediately drops, right? The second that you get your first bad review or the first pissed off customer or the first refund return, right? You're like, oh my God, it's jarring. And you have to be willing to take the L's, take the lumps, but take them as teachable moments and know that you're building this for some larger purpose.
Sure. Did you, in your process along the way, did you stabilize around something that gave you a sense of security and peace while you were doing this? And even in your case, what were some of the guardrails in that, where you have the tremendous peak and the massive dip, or maybe more dips than most, right? As you're getting going, how did you maintain that? I'm going to ask you like 5 questions in one, so make sure you're writing them down. That's what I do. I'm good at that. Let me give you 17 questions. By the way, answer 1, you're fine. And then, where I was going as well was, did you always know you were an entrepreneur, or was that more of a discovered phase of your life where it's like, oh, I'll try this out, and then sure enough, like, well, shit, I can kind of do this. Like, I'm not too bad at it. Walk us through some of that.
No, I was not. I guess I don't have that stereotypical origin story of entrepreneur where you hear those people who are like, I was, flipping candy when I was in elementary school, right? Like selling stuff out of the back of my car in high school. I didn't do any of that stuff. I was so like head down focused on all my extracurricular activities. And then by the time I was in middle school, because my parents had been like, okay, like, are you going to law school or medical school? Which one? And I was like, I'm going to go to law school. So by the time I was in middle school, I already knew I was going to go to law school. Wow. That was just like the track I was going to be on. So I did all of that. And then I got out of school, finished school, and got my big girl job. And I'm working at a law firm in Vegas after school was done. And I liked my job. I worked in a firm that did business litigation and business bankruptcy. So I was just like working away. And then out of nowhere, we decided to start my first company, which at the time was cupcakes. This is back in 2012.
Wow.
And I started that as a total just side hustle with my co-founder, with that Danielle. And that was just like a fun little, like, it started as like a side project, side hustle. I kept my day job during the time that we started this company. So there were quite a few lessons that came out of that for me, which I've since replicated over and over and over in different business endeavors. One, team up with an operations partner. I think solopreneurs, I applaud them because, wow, you're wearing all the hats.
No doubt.
I definitely think like two brains are better than one. So for me, it just made sense. And I've since replicated that in everything that I've done. I have at least one partner in every endeavor. Two, once we figured out, okay, here's what I'm bringing to the table, which includes the funding, I kept my day job. So I literally worked like a 9 to 5. I worked at the firm. And then nights and weekends, I was baking. I was running deliveries. I was helping set up events. I was like working the business with all my free time and using all my free money or like, extra money to fund the business. And I'm glad I did it that way because I didn't have to stress about how am I going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to pay my car payment? Just the kind of like life bills.
Sure, of course.
We didn't have to like strain the business for those things. And in the beginning, the business is going to, take more money than it makes you money.
Yeah.
And so you need some sort of source of income. Like, yes, it could be your savings, but for me, that's really scary.
Sure.
Right. So I appreciated that I did it in that fashion. But there's no right answer. Right. There's a zillion different ways to do it. That's what happened to work for me. But I think at its heart, like when you're in entrepreneurship and you're excited to start something and you have this like itch that has to be scratched to like start this company, you have to do it. Because the worst case scenario is that it doesn't work out. And I've had endeavors that didn't work out. We've had to wind them down and shut them down. That's okay. It's part of the journey. And it totally makes you better in business when you have endeavors that didn't work out, because you can specifically point to why they didn't work out. You can list them out, right? There's no like, severe mystery around it. You can see very clearly, hindsight's always 20/20. So you can see very clearly why it didn't work. And then all you have to do is overlay your critical thinking of being like, I'm not going to do that the next time I try something else. And it actually makes the next journey easier.
Sure. Yeah, critical thinking is not so common nowadays, though. That's the part of the problem, right? If only more people had critical thinking skills. So in terms of making the business work, I love that how you set that up. And I do agree, because I have had personal experience where I tried to build a business without anything underneath me, and I was just this loose cannon firing off on all cylinders, and it was like, I'm stressing myself out more about getting ordinary basic stuff done than I am, trying to grow this business, and it just didn't work for me. So I would agree with you on that tremendously. And I would say the spirit of and the psychology of how to make money, your businesses have evolved at different industries, and you started off in law. Would you say making money, or how would you explain to somebody what it takes to make money in terms of, I know you can go get a job and you can make, X amount of dollars doing this and doing that, but is there some underlying element that you think separates people from making really, really amazing, great money, whether they drive a business and that's what it becomes, or they stay in a job that makes them 6 figures a year for 20 years? What do you have to say about that? Because I think a lot of people want more money. I think a lot of people, certainly desire it, but I don't think they understand really what it takes to get it or to build into it. And therefore, they never really reach that level, right? So you've been around it a lot, and I think you have different perspectives based on having a job and building business. So I'm curious to know what you think about that.
So what I've realized in having a job is that you will be capped on the amount that you can earn. In general, you're going to be capped, right? Let's say your salary is $140,000, right? Like, that's the amount that you can earn from this job, and you're trading your time for money. And that's perfectly fine. I think that, provides a good, solid life. With entrepreneurship, it's very interesting because it's actually at its heart sales, right? So whether you're selling cupcakes or you're selling real estate or like it's at its heart sales, and there is no cap on sales, right? It's the sky's the limit. You could earn potentially however many dollars, right? So when you're thinking about, like I need more money or I want more money, I guess the larger question is like a why, right? Like, why do you think you need more money? Is it a lifestyle thing that you want certain items in your life that you don't have, or you want certain luxuries in your life? Or do you want flexibility? Do you want more time with your family? That's why you want more money, right? It's like you got to kind of figure out your baseline values.
Sure.
There's a book called Values-Based Financial Planning. And it's a really thin little book. You can order on Amazon. It's called Values-Based Financial Planning. And there's an exercise in there in the book where you take out a sheet of paper and you start at the bottom of the page, almost like the rungs on a ladder. You start at the bottom of the page and you write down your answer to, why is money important to me? Why is money important to me? And you write down your whatever answer comes to mind. And then you go up the rung to the next blank, and then you ask, why is whatever you wrote important to me, right? So if you say, why is money important to me? I think I wrote, flexibility.
Sure.
Right? So I wrote flexibility. Okay, why is flexibility important to me? Right? Like, and then you do this like 15 times. So you end up with this ladder of values, of things that are important to you. And I think that's really where you kind of start striking at the heart of like, well, why exactly do you think you need more money? Why do you want to build what you want to build? Why do you want to achieve what you want to achieve?
Right. Do you find that drives you? Is there a point where you can always want more, have more, but is there also a level of like you've earned enough, you made enough where you're satisfied, where basic needs are met as far as what your experience is? Because you probably have crossed several thresholds, right, along the way. It's like you've come across and you're on this total upswing. Obviously, maybe it's not a goal for you, but to make, $1 billion. I know some people want to make $1 billion. And I'm glad you're bringing this up too, because it's part of what I've talked a lot about lately. It's like, I can make a couple $1 million a year and live a fantastic life and do this every day, and I'd be the happiest guy in the world. Like, I don't need to make billions of dollars. I think a lot of the modern day narrative is like, you gotta like go out there, and if you don't make a couple $1 million a year, you're falling behind. And it's like, who's
which is
feeding
not
that?
true.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I disagree with that. I'm like, that's a bunch of BS.
Yeah.
Like $1 million plus a year is a lot of money. Right. I'm not saying that from I get that the next guy could be like, well, that's really low compared to what I make. And I'm like, well, I understand that. But based on just the facts, the numbers, you can do a lot if you're not some jackass that blows all your money all the time. Right. Would you disagree with that?
Here's the reality: is the goalpost keeps moving.
Right.
So I think when you initially start out, you're like, my goal is to make $1 million, right? I'm gonna make $1 million, right? And then you hit that, and in your tax return, you have $1 million worth of taxable income. How dumb are you, right? Like, no, that's not what I wanted to do, The goalpost will keep moving because once the million is reached, now you want to hit 5 million. Now you want to hit 20 million, right? The cars get nicer and fancier, right? Your clothing upgrades, the shoes, right? It's like, I used to wear baby clothes. Now I'm buying red bottoms, whatever, right? It's like the goalpost will always keep moving. That's for sure, right? The vacations will get more luxurious, right? It will always keep moving. And I think all of us know people who have more money than we do who are unhappy, right? Whatever's going on in their personal life, whatever's going on, like they're unhappy. So it's not that money makes you happy. It's that it provides you with certain freedoms and flexibilities. And I'm definitely a firm believer that money can make most things easier in the sense of like, if you have some issue that comes up, right? You have the ability to take care of whatever it comes up. But I think I do believe that it's true as well that like more money, more problems, right? As your company grows larger, it's very different when you have one employee or two employees versus when you have 10 employees versus when you have 15 versus when you have 25 versus when you have 50 employees, right? Now you're no longer a small business. You're a medium-sized business, right? Now your insurance goes up. Now there's each level of the business as revenues grow, the business changes, your wherewithal as a CEO changes, right? Maybe
Very
you're
true.
very, very good at taking a company from 0 to $1 million. But when it's at 5 million, maybe you need to get out of the way because you're not equipped, right?
Sure.
You're not capable of running a company at 5 million and taking it to 50 million. Maybe you're just not equipped.
Right.
So the goalpost will always keep moving. The business will change when it hits these different metrics and levels. And as the business grows larger too, there will be more problems that come up. So how are you going to be equipped to handle that? And do you even want to?
Sure.
Maybe you don't want the headache of having, hundreds of employees.
Right.
What if you don't want that?
Yeah.
That's totally okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And no doubt. Like, I don't think people, if they're going for that, recognize what that really takes. That was a big reveal to myself. I was like, I don't think I want to build a company like that.
Yeah.
I just accepted it. But I realized like that's the path. If you want to get to X, Y, and Z, in that frame of 100 million, billion, you have to build something pretty dynamic and beast-like. And I was like, I don't think I want to do that. Like, because I fell into the trap of everybody else telling me that this is what you got to do, and I bought it.
And that's what for success, right? That's what it looks like to be successful.
That's exactly
like
it.
My real estate mentor, he has over $2 billion of real estate, right? He has 400 employees?
Wow.
Like massive companies, right? Massive companies. And he loves what he does. But like, it's not without its challenges. It's not without its lumps. It's not without the days of being like, this is a lot. And he has a jet. He's got like the things that like, again, we look at like what we define as success.
Sure.
Right. And I think it's so lovely to get to be around it on like an inner level, to hear the good and the bad.
Sure.
Because then you can decide, right? Maybe you're good with your company making $2 million a year with 15 employees, and like, that's your sweet spot.
Yep.
Like that's about all the stress that you can take, right?
Yep.
That's all the drama that you can take.
That's right.
You don't have to grow it to some mega billion, because along with that will come mega billions worth of headaches.
Sure.
And problems and everything else. There's always two sides to the coin.
And the hope that it actually works. Like, you're not guaranteed it. Like, you can go for it, but like, even then, it's like, okay, well, is it going to take you? I was talking to a guy the other day that is 20 years into his company, and he's just now about to sell it for $6 million. And he's going to net $5 after, he's got, $1 million on the note, and then he's going to have to pay capital gains and all that stuff. So
forget
it's like,
what Uncle Sam's going to take too.
Yeah. So it's like, well, 20 years for $6 million. Hey, okay, fair enough. I get it. It's a nice little payout because, it's all that incurred investment and what have you. But it's like, I don't know. I like,
and there's other ways to make $6 million in 20 years.
That's right.
Real estate.
That's right.
I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying? Like,
That's
there's
a plug
other
right
ways
there.
to do it, you know?
So for you, where you're at now, what continues to be the culmination of what your accomplishments are? Obviously, you still got the cupcake business. Yeah, that's amazing. Obviously, real estate, you're crushing it. Is that what it is for you? Like, next, what's the next iteration of your entrepreneurial journey? Obviously, keeping the things that you've got going right now. And then is there a next level for you? Is there more to that rung?
For me, like I said, I'm really enjoying these kind of like, impactful, purposeful work that we're doing with the real estate brokerage, with the venture capital firm. And so for next iterations on business, I'm really excited just to kind of continue to see where the journey takes me. I've always been open to opportunity. That's always kind of been my motto.
Sure.
Is that I'm open to opportunity. I'm more like industry agnostic.
Yeah.
And looking at like, where can I bring value? Like, there's core things I know that I'm good at. So where can I bring value? If I hear a great idea, if someone's got something cooking, like I like that element of entrepreneurship where like all it takes is like, a whiff of one good idea, and you're like, we could be off to the races.
Yeah. So tell us some more about some of those things you think that you're good at. And I want to. Now you get a chance to self-loathe a little bit. Like, tell us about your goods.
Certainly. Well, I'm just so grateful for having a law background because, contracts, the negotiation elements, just having everything kind of tight on the back end, I think are very, very helpful in business. And working at the firm really forced me to pay attention to processes. We had SOPs for everything, and so.
Sure.
that habit followed me into each of the endeavors that I've been part of. And so it's just a nice comfort place for me, and it's extremely helpful in business.
Yeah, of course.
And I also think, one of the things I really enjoy about business is being the spokesperson for the business, being that ambassador for the business, and getting to engage with the community, with our clients, with our customers, and kind of serving as a face for the brand and the company. I've always enjoyed that. And I feel very grateful that I get to do that with the endeavors I have now too.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Branding wise, is that something that you're putting a lot of emphasis on in today's day and age? Are you mindful of like what the new era of personal brand is? I know you just mentioned that in terms of like being the face and championing the whole business. Fantastic. Is there also that part of it where in there you're thinking about, hey, how do I continue to build Lisa's personal brand as well as the businesses as their own independent entities?
Yeah. So just the top of this year in 2023, I've started to invest in my personal brand in a meaningful way. Before I just used my social media accounts just kind of as like kind of a personal daily, here's what's going on. Yeah. I've been having a lot of fun making videos using short form content of just providing experience share of like what's worked for me. So, not like giving advice, right? Or not, certainly not giving like financial advice or anything. It's more around like, hey, like here's things that worked for me or things that didn't work for me, and just throwing it into a quick video. And I appreciate getting the feedback and getting the DMs from people who are like, hey, like I watched this and this was really helpful. Or like I did this and this is how it turned out. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, fantastic. So obviously you've got, between your experience personally and just like, you just mentioned a mentor of yours that's doing bonkers business, which obviously great to have those people in your corners. If you had to extrapolate some of the let's just say the top 3 lessons that you've learned in combination, whether that's your own experience and also what you've heard by being behind the scenes, what would that and I always like to challenge the thought pattern, right? So it's like maybe standard stuff you hear when you watch a video. It's like, oh, stay persevering, and it's like, thanks, guy. I haven't heard that one before. What would it? That's what I just remember all these great mentorship conversations I've had where there's just like, wow, I never heard like that before. What are some of those for you that maybe were shared with you that you heard or that you learned that maybe somebody's not getting access to? Maybe they have, but they just need to hear it a different way because you know it as such.
Well, with my real estate mentor, we've had a lot of conversations around like purpose, right? And like why you're building what you're building. And I had an impasse with a previous business partner, and we were just kind of like reverse engineering that situation. And he asked me, he was like, do you want to be rich or do you want to be king? And I was like,
What do you mean?
Yeah, I was like, rich? Like I was like, and he was like, there's no right or wrong answer. He's like, but which is it? And his point was, are you going to take your ego out of this or not?
Wow.
Right? Because if you keep your ego in it, like I want to be king, right? Then that's the route you're going to go. And it's going to cost the business money. It's going to cost you money.
Wow.
But now you're right.
Sure.
You get to be right.
Which a lot of people want to be right.
Yeah. So he's like, you want to be rich? You want to be king? And I was like, rich? I had to think for a second what he's asking me. And then I was like,
That's
I'd rather be rich.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay. He was like, so then let this other person be king. And I was like it made sense, but I had to work through it a little bit. But just that idea of like, take your ego out of the argument for a second. And if you don't have to be right, what would you rather have? And I was like, that makes sense.
Was that business in jeopardy because of this impasse that you were having? Or was that just more like a situational thing where there was an opportunity to improve on that king or rich part? Like was the business, collapsing and you're like, well, if you keep wanting to be right, the business isn't going to be going. Was it a bigger outcome or was this like micro stuff that was compounding?
Yeah. So that was it was a previous business partner. And it was a culmination of things, but like that was like the head of it of like, now we're kind of at like a final decision here of like, if you turn right or if you turn left, it's going to be 2 different outcomes.
Right.
So which is it? Like, do you have to be right? Do does it have to be, well, like you were the one that got it right? Or is it, hey, like this is the other choice here and actually it's going to benefit everyone better?
Sure. In the case of things of like what not to do's, right? Of a lot of mistakes people make or, based on you being able to see hindsight now, I think hindsight's great. Are there certain things people should be mindful of, landmines they should avoid in any one of these dimensions, right? I mean, again, it could be your top best thoughts. It doesn't have to be specifically to business. It could be just in life in general. It could be getting into business with a partner or, starting a job and a career. But what do you say as like, hey, if you had to avoid these things, right? If you just completely stayed away from these things, what would you say those would be?
I mean, there's so many lessons drawn out, from 13 years. I would say one of the main things that jump out is knowing when to trust your gut. Like, I think there's so much noise, right? There's so much input that we get, whether it's from, mentors or family or significant other or social media or friends. Like, if you ask the same question to all those different people in your life, chances are you may get different varying answers, right? So it's important for you to kind of have a formation of how you'd answer it first, right? Even if it's loosely formed, but just some sort of lean or inclination. So then when you do go out and gather advice and data from other people, from outside sources, like you can overlay that with what you think you already know. And that's powerful.
Sure.
It's really powerful. So you have to learn to trust yourself.
Yeah. That's a fine, I mean, is that like are you one of the fans that says the gut, your gut never lies type of thing? Is it, have you been wrong on gut decisions and instincts before?
I think for the most part, like you know yourself best.
Yeah.
But I also have found that when you go with like the gut instinct, right? It's sometimes it's not based on logic. Most of the times it's not, right? It's not based on like logic or rationale. It's how you feel a certain way. And I think in business, we're trained not to pay attention to that. Like oftentimes they tell you, right? Like take emotions out of it, or like don't bring that here, or like like keep it very siloed and separate and compartmentalized. And I think there's a place for that. But you do have to have some sort of balance around it. Sure. Otherwise you don't, it's very scary, I think, if you don't feel like you can trust yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you take the word balance? Is balance something that you focus on? Do you believe in balance? Is it something that you try to work on, or are you just in your zone based on how you operate your life? Or is it more of a deliberate thing, or is it just like, it just happens?
I think balance, I don't view balance as like a 50-50. For me, like the idea of like work-life balance, for example, it's whatever your capacity and bandwidth is at that moment. There was a long period of time in my life where I worked 7 days a week. And it's because I was totally fine. Like that, I was good with that.
Sure.
Now I take Sundays where I don't schedule anything on Sundays. I don't schedule any sort of meetings, podcast interviews, none of that. I literally have the calendar wide open on Sundays. Maybe I'll go to church. Maybe I'll go to brunch with some girlfriends, whatever it is. But I don't like schedule any like calls, meetings, anything like that on Sundays. Yeah. So Sunday's my day. And for me, that's enough. Some people might need a whole week. Some people might need a weekend. Some people, whatever it is, like that's enough for me at this stage.
I like the Sunday thing too. It's funny. I do the same thing. Sunday's the day. It's almost like the day you just get a chance to regroup. I did a podcast recently with a good friend, Devin, phenomenal human being, with supporting his daughter in cancer while he was playing in the NFL. It's one of the greatest stories ever. And our podcast, he talked a lot about well-being. And the point of the well-being was there's different areas that contribute to the well-being. It's the PERMA model, and I forget what each letter of PERMA stands for, but it was the point was a lot of people focus all of their energy on the accomplishments side.
Mhm.
And so their well-being is off
Mm.
because it's not being equally distributed so that you have this general essence of well-being. And I said, man, I've made that mistake. I was all in on the
Sure.
accomplishments and everything else was suffering. And
Mhm.
I'm like, golly, why do I feel off?
Mhm.
And I was like, wow, thanks. In those moments, it's just like, that's what I was hoping to get to right there. I remember what it feels like to be in great well-being standing.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I dig that. Okay, so we'll wrap this up here in a second. I kind of want to ask you a question around, because I think about like you as a business woman and a kind-hearted, kindred spirit. How does one like you encourage the dating world like to approach managing that? Are you like no, I don't want to deal with that? And I say this because like I'm on this relationship quest to be better in my relationship. So it's like a kind of a question that was coming through as part of like, how does one separate, in your case, from being so into the business, even like you said, in the avoidance, you go to the business, and then welcome in a partner and allow that person to come into your space to help it work? Because I think a lot of people out there are trying to figure out how to make that situation work, where even in my case, I was like, golly, I got to give my partner time. It's like, no, I want to build the business. Like, the hell with that. I don't want to give her time. And I was like,
Mhm.
wait, I got to fix this. Like, I can't be this guy. So more of a curiosity thing. How have you approached that in your journey? And has it even been important to you, or what's like the context of that situation?
So I feel very grateful in the sense that like the relationships I've had, like I've always had like very supportive partners, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm the type of personality that I just in kind of like a masculine feminine energy, right? Like in business, my day-to-day jobs, right, of like running the businesses, like of course I have to be in like a masculine energy, right?
Sure.
I'm making decisions,
Yeah.
I'm making tough decisions, I'm driving the bus, right? So at home, like sometimes I don't want to make all the decisions,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
I don't want to have to drive the bus. Like, um, so I do need someone who understands like that duality of like, let her be driving the bus on her stuff,
Mm,
right? But like I need like, like kind of like I said, that balance between the masculine and feminine energy. So like at
sure.
home, like I enjoy the feminine energy for me in being in my
Yeah.
feminine
Yeah.
energy, right?
Yeah.
Of like I like to cook and like let's have dinner together and like I said, I don't want to be like driving the bus all the time too,
Sure.
right?
Right.
If we're gonna
Yeah.
plan a trip or something, like I don't want to have to do all the planning and like pick all the things and book the tickets
Yep.
and
Yep.
drive the
Yep.
bus, right? Like someone else can drive the bus on
Sure.
that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's fantastic because it's like you, and I might be saying this wrong, and I mean, people are probably gonna, yap at me for it. But is it more when you say feminine energy? Is it more submissive in that case where it's like you're allowing yourself to be the female in the relationship, and you're letting the man take care of you. You're in that part of it. You're not having to say, okay, this is what we're doing. I'm in control. I expect this to happen. That's where we're going. This is what we're doing. You're more like you're along for the ride. Because like almost in nature, that's kind of how it should be, right? The man should be, and again, every relationship's different. I ain't saying this is what it's supposed to be. I'm just kind of using, historical facts. Is like, the man treats the lady to the dinner. He cooks the dinner. He, takes us out. He opens the door. He does all that good stuff. Is that what you're saying? Is that's kind of what you're hoping for as you separate from the business identity to the relationship at home
Yeah,
type of thing?
totally. Of like,
Okay.
the kind of more traditional, right? Of
Yeah.
opening the door and paying for dinner and just kind of making sure I'm like taken care of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I said, just with, in business, I'm driving the bus. So like
Sure.
at home, again, for planning a vacation or something, like I don't want to have to drive the bus on that and,
Hmm.
plan it and pick all the things. And this is what we're doing. Like, you tell me what we're doing.
Sure.
Like I'm down.
But emotionally, do your needs have to be met there too? Like, is that part of you? Because again, in controlling the bus, driving the bus at work, there's the discipline of the mentality and the emotional part where you're like, you're strong.
Hmm.
Do you let yourself decompress there on the emotional side and then hope that there's emotional needs that are met there as well? Because like I think that's an important part for a lot of people out there where it's like, this is real human dynamics where it's like, I'm only asking these questions like this because I wanted somebody to hear it that might be dealing with a certain situation similarly to know how you think about it and sort of maybe give themselves permission or free themselves up from this, prison of what it could be like or how it should be, whatever that might be. That's why I'm asking you in sort of a bit of a more deeper detail.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I'm definitely a big fan of the fact that like you cannot draw water from an empty well, right? So if you spend your days in business supporting everybody else, right? And you're the go-to person when things are on fire, like at home, like if you also have to do that too, there is no balance, right? There is no like release valve. There's no like duality around it. So for me on a personal level, like I need a supportive partner. I need someone who is like, I get you're like doing your thing, but like I'm here to back you up and like I will support you.
Sure.
Like I'm here to support you.
When you say supportive, because I'm like this, like my partner asks me this all the time. She's like, can you support me? And I'm like, sure, I thought I do. I am. What do you mean by that? Like when you say support, again, I'm drilling because I think it's important. Words matter. It's like, I think I know what support is. Like, hey, can I get you coffee in the morning when we wake up? And can I bring that over? And then sometimes it's like, well, she had a different thought experiment and expectation for me to be a supportive partner, to which I didn't realize as the man. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. So I guess I had that one off. And then I can trace it back to all these things that I had in my relationship environment from before. When you say supportive, is it more so like encouraging you to, keep following your dream? Because that's support. Or is it, when you get home and you've had a bad day with customers and you're like, I want to throw the middle fingers up and say, F this, F that. Are you just venting? And then are you saying, hey, just listen to me? Is that the type of support that you're talking about? Or how would you define the support as you're suggesting it here when you say that?
I think it can be all of the above, but I think there's a certain level of like thoughtfulness and care around feeling supported by your partner in the sense that like, that your partner's like rock solid, like they're consistent, they're stable, they have your back. I think there's something very comforting about knowing that, as opposed to they're flaky or they're wishy-washy or there's no trust there, right?
Sure.
Like that's not support, right?
Sure.
That's not a supportive environment.
Right.
So, it takes time to build that as well, but I think we all need that, and I think especially strong women who, again, maybe driving the bus on their career or driving the bus on their businesses, like, at least for me, like I need a partner who I know has my back. Because I know like I'm supporting everyone else over here on this side, right? So I need to feel supported by my partner and like we have each other's back.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not gonna do it to you, but I'd be like, hey, Lisa, take us into the girls' locker room and talk to us about how the girls talk about this whole thing, right? I won't do it to you. I've kept you long enough. Couple more things. I'm gonna ask you a question about Always in the Grow, but before we wrap up, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on the roller coaster of questions that Manny asks here on Always on the Grow. Where can people go to find you, and tell us some more about maybe what you're working on that you want to point people to? As I jokingly say, listen, they're coming. All the eyeballs and all the people, they're going to be seeing this thing over time. We're going to get them there. So love to have you share that for us.
Definitely. So I'm on all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, at Lisa Song Sutton. You can check out my website, lisasongSutton.com. And then obviously, we're just, like I said, focused on the real estate, venture capital. And then I actually just finished an e-course on the mailbox stores.
Hey, now.
Yeah, because I had so many people who were really excited about the business model. I did a YouTube video with my girlfriends, Cody Sanchez, and we kind of broke down the business, and everyone was like, love it. And so I put together an e-course about how to open your own independent mailbox store.
Let's go.
Yeah.
E-course, baby. Come on now. Hey, go buy an e-course from Lisa Song Sutton on putting the mailboxes out there. That's good passive residual models, I would imagine.
With mailboxes, they're like mini storage units, right? And I love diversification first off. So like, these stores, like it's mailbox rental pack and ship stores. Cody and I laugh and we call them like a boring business, right? But it's essential in the sense that we were open the entire pandemic, right?
Yeah.
It's a steady, reliable, like the mail's not going anywhere, right?
Sure.
UPS, FedEx, Postal Service, it's around, it's here to stay. And so I just love having that as part of my business portfolio because it's one of those businesses that's kind of evergreen. It's always going to be around and needed.
That's fantastic. Again, keep up all the great work. I mean, it's amazing to see what you've done. Keep hearing new stories, seeing you in passing and catching you on the social channels of the Grapevine and, seeing the great work you're doing. Now you got the e-course, in this format with these interviews on this show, I really try to, again, it would take us all day to really extract all those, different elements. So I try to make it as dynamic as possible in the questions I ask. And, hopefully people will, I'm looking at the camera right there. I'm talking to you watching. Yeah. Get a chance to understand you and know more about you. I trust me, I watch so many podcast interviews and different things. And I'm always curious, like, well, if you went a little bit deeper in that, let's learn a bit more about them there. So what does always on the grow mean to you?
I think that's just continuing to be willing to invest in yourself and do that work, do that personal development work that I think we'll continue to do, through the rest of our lives. But be willing to do that because it's sometimes it's hard, but it's worth it.
Sure. Willing. That's a good word right there. Willing to do it, folks. Last thing, anything that we didn't touch on or cover or that you feel is, I need to say that. I want to share this. It's on the top of my heart. You always go back and you try to think about, I should have said this. Is there something in there that's so important to you that I didn't get to, that you didn't think of, that you think that the audience would find valuable, that would help you feel even more liberated at the conclusion of this?
I think, and we touched on it, but just the element of gratitude, right? I can't really put into words how important it is to try to lead with kind of a gratitude mindset, because just in even your example earlier about, going down to volunteer, if we don't continue to take stock of like all the things that are going good in our lives, right? If we don't pay attention to the good that we have, even on the bad days, like that's when it's too easy to unravel and get lost. So you have to stay focused on the good stuff that's in your life.
So on that note, I just got a book, The Body Keeps a Score. I had a great conversation about a week and a half ago with a guy, and in the spiritual essence of that dialogue, he's like, you got to get this book. And I said, I'm in. Because for me, the trauma from the past of my car wreck and losing my mom and other events that happened in life really scarred me. And in that capacity, when you talk about being grateful and focusing on the good, I realized that in my life, if I wasn't practicing the parts of seeing what's good, appreciation, gratitude, I had natural imagery that was coming into my mind of worst case, of crash, of failure, because the implant of all of those experiences. And so I've recognized that point, how powerful it is. And more importantly, the purpose of doing it as part of a practice. Because if not, are you doomed? And I'm not saying I'm a bad person. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the power of the mind and how you utilize that is indefinitely supportive in the process forward. So I am with you. That being said, this has been amazing. And I'm staring at the middle of the table here, but I'm going to look back at you and we're going to wrap this up with all the joys and all the blessings and all the gratitude, because I severely appreciate you for coming down here and sharing and bringing Cupcake down. And we've had a great time. Hopefully you enjoyed it.
Yes,
until next time.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you. Thank you.